You are now tuned in to DameSmiff.
Yeah. Loser, that is my name. Shooter, this is no game. Who's this? Oh, this is Dame. Come to move ya and change the game. Booyaka, killed me some lames. They tried to take our culture, so stay in your lane. I do this just to stay sane. You're not the king, so peep by our reign. I make it do what it do just like a vulture. Every time I rhyme, I up and invent a new culture. Black music is over at your door like a Jehovah. Cracking heads open just to reinvent all the old stuff. But you know what? I'm colder and colder and colder and colder. I thought I had told y'all, but now I will show y'all. Yeah, for this verse here is over. Break the beat down. Oh yeah, well I'm a loner, so know us. So do just what you wanna do. This movie here is starring you. Never settle for number 2, cause there won't be no other you. Think that there is another you. Tell me who is the other you? Now you sitting here sounding just like the mother fool.
Shake that shawty, shake that shawty, up and down, it's your party.
Yeah, I bet you like that. But tell you what, baby girl, you ain't getting that time back.
When I see you out up in these streets, I know you doing sweet, no trick but no treat. I love the way your beats, baby, move my feet, and the message that you speak is just what I need. Now, when I tune in, I get the moving, we get the moving, the world is moving, such a pleasure. Baby, can you do me one thing? Can you just make love to my ears once again?
Yeah, well, who you think you bumping to? Some kid with some other dude. Skimming some pyramid, I slid past them other dudes. Such an impeccable mage, I'm ineffable. Y'all just learning about the biz, I've been set in stone.
Shake that shawty,
Yeah.
shake that shawty,
Yeah.
up and down,
Yeah.
it's your party.
Yeah, I had to let you know them kicks couldn't let them go. Gave you some ignorance, cause I know that's all you know. So when you do this, they bound to ask you who this. Let them know you down with Dame, straight coolin'. Better with your precious gear coming out to do this, cause when I press play, they coming out straight fooling right.
Shake that shawty, shake that shawty, up and down, it's your party.
Right? I bet you like that, but tell you what, baby girl, you ain't getting the time back.
What's going on? It's your boy DameSmiff. Ooh, my mic's attacking me, but I'm out here, y'all. Let's get it. We're gonna be discussing a few different things today, kind of like a dual topic today, and essentially we'll be discussing how global tours are being affected by our new economic deals and things like that, and then we'll also be looking into how, continuing our theme of emotions, how sound affects your mood and things like that. So as we get into this, make sure you hit the like button for those of you who are ready for this. And then this lets everybody who wants to see this kind of content that this is dope content. And then also hit the subscribe button. That way you can catch my latest streams. So put a bunch of noise in the chat and we'll get started. But first, I kind of want to break down the premise of this video, right? And so essentially we have kind of like a huge deal going on, the PetroDollar deal, and it was a security for oil trade that made the dollar the global middleman for energy, right? While it hasn't collapsed overnight, the exclusive grip of the dollar on the oil market is loosening as Saudi Arabia diversifies its global partnerships. So what that means for musicians is essentially the people and channels and relationships that affect how we necessarily navigate travel, retail shipments and things like that. And of course, how we just do business in general is going to be greatly affected by the fuel resource we have access to, right? So what this does is it shifts who's in control of, let's say, oil, who's in control of, let's say, pricing, and how they're going to negotiate it, right? So because Saudi Arabia is presumably diversifying their portfolio, this is going to create differences in the projections most people are expecting for their businesses. So let's think about, like, let's say Microsoft, right? And they want to get chips over to us, right? Well, the boats needed to get the chips over here, or the planes needed to get the chips over here, are now going to change in cost and price, which then changes the cost and price to then give us the products that Microsoft wants to develop. That's just one company. So then if you think about all the other companies that are getting affected, you start to see cultural shifts suddenly, similar to how, like, it's really expensive for musicians to go into the studio. So then we started making in-home studios and workstations. It's the same version, right? But the thing that's really going to affect musicians, though, is going to be how we're going to define, determine, and plan, let's say, tours going forward, or even just, you know, short stints, like maybe one leg tours and things like that. So as we get into this, we're going to check out our first video here, and it's going to kind of break down a bit of the Petro deal and some of the confusion that came along with it. PetroDollar deal.
The PetroDollar agreement? Complete fiction. There was never a formal treaty. The Government Accountability Office confirmed it. The Atlantic Council confirmed it. Fact-checkers debunked it. But the myth revealed truth. People sensed the ground shifting. In 1974, Nixon and Saudi Arabia made an informal deal. Oil priced in dollars. Oil revenues invested in US Treasury bonds. In exchange, America provides military protection. No contract, no expiration date. Just aligned incentives worth trillions.
So essentially, if you can't tell, this is an AI content creator explaining pretty much verified information. I went and fact checked it, a bit of it, and for the most part, this is 100% true, 100% accurate. And there's only like maybe like, I think, a 0.6 difference in them saying the inflation number in January being 3% versus 2.4%. So this is all accurate, but the key thing to remember is that this is a deal that's been set long before, similar to like the prorated deal or our streaming, not a streaming number, our royalty rate and stuff like that. And now we're starting to see a shakeup, which is going to cause a huge shift in culture.
Sensed the ground shifting. In 1974, Nixon and Saudi Arabia made an informal deal. Oil priced in dollars. Oil revenues invested in US Treasury bonds. In exchange, America provides military protection. No contract, no expiration date. Just aligned incentives worth trillions. Every country that wanted Saudi oil needed dollars. That created permanent global demand. Saudi Arabia recycled dollars into US debt. The Saudis got military protection. For 50 years, it worked perfectly. Then the incentives died. The US became the world's largest oil producer. We don't need Saudi oil. China became Saudi Arabia's biggest customer. They don't need dollar-exclusive pricing. Alternative payment systems exist. Russia built one. China has CIPS. The proof: dollar reserves hit 56.92% in Q3 2025, down from 57.08% in Q2 and 58.51% in Q1. The trend is unmistakable.
So it's showing that because of more independence coming from specifically the United States, the deal that was sent between the United States and Saudi Arabia is no longer making sense, and it's no longer favorable. So now they're pretty much planning to figure out how to make this make sense in the future, just to put it in layman's terms, right? And the video was then laying out the evidence that they were using to prove that this wasn't working for them, right? Meaning that because America became the first or the biggest oil producer, they didn't need to then work or produce as much oil through Saudi Arabia. So now with China coming up in competition, there is a whole different conversation about why having that deal in place makes sense, and then also what that deal should look like if your biggest consumer is someone else. So it really has to make sense for both nations.
Cost of avoiding the dollar used to be prohibitively high. Now it's dropping. Countries are taking the exit. No, but ignoring this is foolish. The dollar still handles half of all international payments. the dollar still makes up 89% of foreign exchange transactions. The infrastructure and trust don't disappear overnight. This isn't a cliff, it's a slope. We're not going from dominance to collapse. We're moving to a multipolar world where the dollar shares the stage with the euro, the UN, and other currencies. What that means for you, the free ride is ending. The exorbitant privilege, the ability to print money without consequences, is fading. You're paying more for imports. You're facing elevated interest rates. You have less purchasing power abroad.
And a lot of this makes sense if you just think of it in just numbers, right? Culturally, nobody would want this, right? Nobody would want to pay more for anything, right? But if you think about specifically how they're wording this, it makes sense. So let's walk through it.
Money without consequences is...
So you can't print money without consequences, right? So you have to have a reason to print the money that makes sense, right? You can't just keep dumping money into the economy because it's going to lower the value of the money, right? That makes sense, right? We all get that?
Fading. You're paying more for imports.
So you're paying more for imports. I want to take a second to look at this AI created video and first of all point out how terrible this cash register looks. But on the other side of this, the concept here is that imports are usually more expensive because they have to be shipped in here, right? So then what that looks like is culturally the access to, let's say, any type of cuisine or any type of product has to logistically make sense in the economy. So then let's say the examples here, they have like olive oil and chocolates and coffee, right? If that's manufactured out your country, then it's going to cost money to bring it in. And on top of all the fees to just bring it in, you have to think about the cost of where they're getting the fuel from, right? So on the consumer side of things, most of what you're going to consider is probably like the price. But why the price is there usually is kind of obvious, right? It's usually kind of clear and cut. Price gouging is what people are mistaking this for. Price gouging would be that if we just picked any product for any reason and just raise the price because we think you could pay more, right? But because this video is pointing out specifically you'll pay more for imports, then it changes what it is that you'll have access to based on the cost. So now if you want to have coffee and you don't believe in, I guess, a company that's within your country, then it's going to be more expensive because the company that you like that's outside has to spend more money, especially now, to get it into your country, along with, especially in our current situation with the tariffs and everything. So that's the first example. Let's see what the next one is.
You're facing elevated interest rates.
So the next one is interest rates. A lot of times when we think about interest rates, like at least when I was learning about it, it just seemed like just a random number that they picked. In a way it could be, but what you're really focusing on is your decision to participate with said interest rate, right? And the reason that's there is because it kind of nudges you to pay the bill. Like that's really all it's there for. It's not really there to get more money out of you or anything like that. It's a cultural incentive because of, let's say, your credit score or the fact that you may not have credit or things like that will affect what it is they'll set the interest rate at. So with that being understood, then you'll have to deal with culturally answering the question of why you would ever want to deal with an interest rate, right? So for some people, it could be going to school. Some people, it could be like paying for like really, really large bills. And sometimes it can be just for fun. Like maybe you just want to buy a really nice car and feel like you want to take a loan out for it, right? The part you're going to have to deal with now is where this money you're borrowing comes from, and then how you're willing to pay it. And usually, because most people will default on the loans that they get, they're going to bank on you defaulting and then servicing the loan. So now you have to choose which banks you bank with, and then culturally how you have a relationship with that bank so you can lower your interest rate. So that's pretty much how that would be handled for most people in those situations.
You have less purchasing power abroad.
And you'll have less purchasing power abroad, meaning like if you leave the country, your dollar won't go as far as it did before, which may or may not be a big deal. Like I said, depending on where and what you're doing in your lifestyle.
This is what transitions look like. Not dramatic collapse, gradual price increases, and
this is something that is like happened before. Like they said, you can look at in the 20s what the world used to look like and then what it is today. Everything's more expensive, everything is bigger, everything's faster, and people are still here and people are still functioning, but the gap between people who are culturally participating in all of this is widening.
quietly changing rules. The dollar stays important for decades, but the unchallenged supremacy from 1974, that's over. The irony? The very policies America used to exercise power, cutting Russia off
These photos are crazy.
from SWIFT, weaponizing the dollar, are exactly why countries built escape routes. If this breakdown cut through the noise and showed you what's really happening, hit that subscribe
But
button.
yeah,
and give
that's a good breakdown of like understanding how larger deals will affect you as it comes down to things for planning. I guess you can say for your fans, and like when we were talking about ticketing and things like that, you can really consider what's going on culturally and then compare it to what's going on with your business and then how it's going to hold up. So like we've seen situations with Starbucks moving from Seattle to Tennessee. That's like a micro version of this, where like the value of where you're currently doing business doesn't really make sense. So you're starting to shift where you're going to start doing business. And then suddenly where you were doing business has to now figure out how they're going to benefit from this change. And everybody's affected, from the people that live in Seattle to the people that live in Tennessee. And then all the people that worked in these companies that were affected by all these different decisions and things like that. So let me know in the comments what you would think is going to happen when you're considering, let's say, a world tour ticket for your favorite artist. Let's say somebody from Europe is coming to New York. How much do you think that ticket's going to cost now? And then how much do you think it's going to cost them, just on a ballpark number, right? So let's get into the next topic here. And this one's going to be kind of a switch up here, where we're going to talk about the emotion of sound. Let's get into it.
Strange Abilities unfurls its latest exploration into how infrasound quietly shapes human emotion, cognition, and behavior through real-world cases and lab findings. A physicist explains how low frequencies travel through buildings and forests, while a musician shares how certain tones trigger unexpected shifts in mood during performances.
If you haven't noticed too, this is also an AI content creator.
A survivor of a storm recounts an eerie sense of dread when distant booms rumbled through the ground, tying it to measurable pressure waves. Psychologists discuss thresholds of perception and the brain's uncanny ability to interpret these invisible messages. The episode blends data, anecdotes, and interviews to reveal a subtle, powerful influence that science is only beginning to map. Strange Ability.
So essentially, science is learning that there is actually a certain feeling that you can feel, or that is emitted from your brain with certain frequencies, right? Now, we've known this for a minute, right? But it's gotten to the point to where we're starting to be able to pinpoint and laser focus on how to pull that off, right? I talk about this a lot with movies and books, where I say like the director and writer just has an emotion they're trying to drive home. They're not really trying to like create no story, really. They just want you to feel one way, or maybe two extremes or something like that. And so we're starting to do the same thing with sound. And I first noticed this with hip hop, where we moved from the boom bap drums and things like that to a little bit more digital drums. When that happened, we started to kind of lose the unique niche of different producers and like beat makers. And then you started to see like a homogenized, like low 808 bass everywhere. And what that did was, when you performed your song live, or if you heard a DJ play the song and the volume was a certain point and everything was mixed a certain way, that low kick drum, that bass, would just hit you hard and then just make you feel a certain way, right? And so a lot of times when we're considering our favorite songs, that's not even a thought. Like, we just think like, oh, this is just a good chord, or this singer is doing it. We don't really consider the actual science that's going on behind our ears that these people are designing, right? And so that's just hip hop. And then we can get into like the whole, what do you believe in as far as how these frequencies are causing you to behave, how these frequencies are affecting the brain, and how these frequencies are making you basically understand music and things like that. So there's that one side of it, and then when you add in the extra side of it of, let's say, the lyricism behind the song, now you have to consider, okay, the feelings you feel from just the frequencies. Then you can get into the music theory. Are the chords minor? Are the notes long and drawn out and things like that? And then you can get into the lyricism with the similar principles underneath it. How are very loud notes felt versus very quiet ones? How are very long high notes felt versus very short low notes? Does percussive, I guess you can say, intonation or attacks on notes make a difference versus smoother ones, more rounded introductions to notes and things like that? So all of those can be combined, and then when we place these effects on, let's say, a CD or a vinyl or something like that, then we create that vacuum I was talking about, where we can repeat this feeling over and over and over again with just a button. The next level to this, though, is where we can now take this exact formula or these layers to music and sound and then amplify them. So then we can use speakers, we can use movies, we can use amphitheaters, we can use giant stages and things like that. When you ever look at like the stage design, especially when we were talking about the riggers for large tours and stuff like that, there's like scientific equations that go into how these angles are shaped and where sound's gonna go, how these frequencies will be reverberated back. Some frequencies cancel each other out, so then you won't hear them if you're in the wrong or like, you know, setup or mix and things like that. And so knowing all of this, it makes music way more complicated, but it also makes it way more, I guess you can say, detailed when it comes to what you can control. It's a conversation that a lot of artists usually shy away from because it's not as musical, it's not as sexy. Like, it's not, nobody wants to watch Michael Jackson turn knobs, you know, we want to see him sing. So the idea of you sitting there mixing a track for like 3-4 hours is just not, you know, attractive. So what people usually land on are presets, templates, or influence from like other musicians and things like that. And this is where you can get this laser focused kind of strategy where you'll try to figure out, okay, if everybody knows, this actually was a story we covered with Katy Perry. If we know that our fans react a certain way to this kind of music, let's just keep doing that. But if suddenly the feeling is met with the human experience of saying, oh, this is boring, or it's too much, or I'm tired of this, then you have to figure out that new formula. But then where do you get influence from if you don't have the experience, or don't know the equations, or don't know the theory and things like that? That's going to be super important as we break down this next clip, where we're going to have, I believe, a vocal coach actually explain to us a little bit of a live performance in real time. And he's going to show you from his perspective how everything is going to work from a, I guess you can say, a singer's perspective specifically, but you're going to see a lot of the technical side of things as well.
This stuff is difficult, you know, it's really, really difficult. The amount of repetitions that you have to put in to be able to hold it down in a performance like this, especially an outdoor venue like Coachella. Guys, the reverb, you kidding me? I would love to know what is in their in-ear mix.
So he's reacting to a group. It's a girl group. I believe they're called Beanie or Beanie, and they're at Coachella. And they're, like you said, they're at an outdoor event. Part of this performance, though, that makes this go crazy is that they are dancing while they're doing this. So we haven't gotten into the visual sides of performances. That'll probably be what we talk about next week. But as far as the emotional sides of this, I want you to see how, if he plays enough of the clips, how they try to translate emotion through movement alongside sound, and then just think about all the layers to sound that has to happen for this to work the way they want it to work.
Are they harmonizing with each other? Because that can just go bad so fast with so many different members. Just, you know, especially at something like Coachella where they're churning out different acts, their in-ear mix could just could go bad so fast.
Look at his face. That's the face of somebody who is studying right now.
I feel like that was I finally found a section where it didn't feel perfect to me, which then tells me, okay, then they probably do have their mics turned up enough to where, like, you know, you can hear it in the audience and we can hear it, right? Because if everything is so perfect for a performance like this, it's a dead giveaway to me that like there's either tuning on the back end or, you know, they've got their mics lower.
So did you ever consider that your favorite singer could be tuning themselves live while they're singing in real time? Or did you ever think that they're always using just their vocal cords? Sometimes the fans don't really know what's going on, and that's a part of the magic to everything. So like you could see like a young pop star, or like, you know, this is a young girl group, and immediately think like, oh wow, they must have been in the studio practicing like a 14-year-old at Lady Gaga's career. Well, not really, because similar to how I was saying, you can be a rapper that doesn't know how to read music and then suddenly start making money in music. Some people don't have to really know how to sing to perfection, but they do need to know how to perform. And so it works. Now, when we get into the conversation about whether or not it's valuable to you as a fan or something like that, that's really up to you. Like, I don't know if you would then be turned off and not pay for more tickets if the little cute girl in shorts is not in tune. You know, I don't know if that matters to you.
At least in this performance take, but yeah, clearly they're in it. That's fantastic, guys. And I'm not trying to just like hammer my way on that and be like annoying or anything. I mean it with respect. I mean it with like, wow, you know, shocking, like fantastic, impressive. You guys would be shocked how many people lip sync shows like this. I guess that's my point. Or will turn their mic down so low to the degree that it's like you can't even hear them.
So right now you're seeing choreography in the back, but like he's saying, you wouldn't even know, because like you'll barely hear it a little bit or something like that. There's audio tricks to it, right? My thing is that I think a lot of engineers and stuff like that, they think it's okay to do, but they think it's like something you also don't value. I think that's the worst part about it. Other than like, oh, it's like you're finding out the keyboard player at your church transposes the keyboard. It's like, oh, I thought you were like practicing your scales all this time and like learning the key signatures, you know? So I don't know if you guys value it that much, but it seems like the mixing engineers or the live mixing engineers sometimes have to play with whether or not you do or don't care in order to do that, because it really doesn't matter at the end of the day if you just want to see the song. But if it did matter, I wonder how much of that is playing into their, you know, career decisions as a live production assistant or engineer. All this is just them doing choreography in the back. That's why the video's not moving and stuff.
Props. I mean, again, booking Coachella, that is such a huge milestone. Respect.
Even like if you think about the structure of what they're doing, like they probably had an intro chorus or intro verse chorus verse, and then probably this breakdown right here. Even this breakdown is probably like out of the normal CD mix. It could be in the CD mix, but the point is that it's supposed to drive you to move with them and like dance and things like that, and then make sure all the things you are enjoying about the song are, you know, high energy and make a lot of sense for the song and stuff like that. So I think the biggest part too, when you're thinking about like just putting choreography in your music, is you want to be able to connect the visuals with the audio from the bodies of the dancers. I see a lot of groups that get on stage and they think like because the lights flash, the lazy turn they did wasn't noticed or something like that. And my little bit of time in marching band taught me that like the visuals of a sharp turn matter a whole lot. And then when you see it on camera, you can really tell.
I always give vocalists respect when they can dance and they can sing. It's incredible. And again, really takes a lot of training. Wow, takes a lot of training. Stamina, vocal stamina, management of the diaphragm, of the ascension, the descension of the diaphragm. Great job. Come out. Starts to waver. That's the test right there. After a break like that, do you keep your pitch stability or does your pitch start to waver? If the pitch starts to waver, that's not good. If you can go through something like that as a performer, and when you come right back to singing, your pitch does not change, I'm impressed.
So another thing that he's pointing out here is about the pitch being clear when you're coming back from all of this. But I want you to also notice how fit he is. And then compare that to your favorite singer who also dances and sings, right? When I see a lot of rappers that can't rap the full verse on stage, even if it is just them standing there, it's usually one or two things. It's a lack of breath control or just a lack of fitness. It's never just that they don't know their lyrics. I highly doubt that. But usually when you're doing something that's as strenuous as like full choreography, and then you're going to go into full singing, and you have to be on like pop star level accuracy, not just like, you know, tight, you know, intimate venue type of singing, then most of what you're going to be struggling with is your fitness. It's going to be the fact that you're knowing when to breathe, when to, I guess you can say, harness your energy and not like overexert yourself in order to have the full climax at the end of your performance. But again, you're thinking about all this stuff in like rehearsal and practice too. So it could be almost muscle memory by the time you get on stage, but he's pointing it out just to show you that there is levels to this.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, nice. Shut it down. Huge milestone. Singer. This milestone for them. Great job. If watching this makes you want to improve your voice,
Let's see if
I created this
notes about some of the earlier moments in here.
Singer method.
Let me see, because a lot of what we're looking for really is how he breaks down the venue and how they're basically designing their vocals for the stage, really, and for your
exhale.
ears.
When you exhale, that's how we speak or we sing, and so you have to. Very difficult. Nice. Yeah, there we go. Because right, you heard that shout. Awesome job, you know, having that kind of pitch stability where you're landing right in the center of the note, which they are for the most part. Just a couple slides here and there, but very few at all, almost to the point.
Did you guys hear the slides he's talking about? Like, if you think about how precise you have to be to point out the slides he's talking about, it means that he's not even listening to like what you may be listening to. And I hear this a lot when I'm playing like for mentors and stuff like that. Like, they're listening for things you're probably not even paying attention to.
Yeah, there we go. Because right, you heard that shout.
I think that was one right there.
Awesome job, you know.
And that is like the very beginning of the last notes of the measures.
Having that kind of pitch stability where you're landing right in the center of the note, which they are for the most part. Just a couple slides here and there, but very few at all, almost to the point where it's unbelievable. But when you're moving and you're dancing and all of that stuff, it really messes with the ascension of the diaphragm that I might talk about if I remember. But that's the foundation of your voice. When your diaphragm ascends, that's when you exhale. And when you exhale, that's how we speak or we sing. And so you have to control and stabilize that ascension and then the descension as well. Yeah, if I said ascension, I meant, yes, no, I did mean ascension. I need more coffee, okay? But yeah, you have to control that ascension to control the voice. When you're dancing, when you're moving, that's what can be very difficult.
Yeah, and essentially, it's similar to playing wind instruments. It's just that you're pushing air faster or slower. You're not really worried about more so your vocal cords here. But basically, if you're exhaling very, 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 very loudly, or basically you're singing very loudly, the ability to control the amount of air coming out for you to produce that volume has to be understood. And then when you're thinking about how low the note is, which means you're going to need more air to project. And then when you're thinking about tonality, how like powerful you have to angle the pitch and things like that, you have to consider all of that. And that's why he said at the end there, and then when you're dancing, it adds a whole lot more. Usually the greatest singers, they have the mic stationary and they just sing. So it makes that easier
to control.
and she cleaned up those long notes a whole lot now, and it seems like because she's not dancing as much.
Yeah, great high notes there, live. I mean, it already sounds great. Oh, I like the electric guitar, that's nice. So look down in the comments, how long have they been a group now? Because that seems like a relatively quick come up as well. I know I'm sure had a big team, but Coachella is a huge milestone. That is a huge milestone. So let me know, how long did it take? What was the progression there?
And then when you think about what he's listening to versus what the fans may be listening to, she was doing a lot of like lower range in that part right there, and it's very hard, like I said, to stay in tune when you get to the lower range of your vocals and stuff like that, especially as a girl who's dancing on stage at the same time. So the idea of most musicians just getting up on stage and dancing and singing is probably the biggest discrepancy you'll see, especially with younger musicians. That's why he's asking, like, I wonder how long they've been doing this.
Always fascinated by that. Okay, that is almost unbelievable that she has that kind of pitch stability while being lifted up and brought down. I mean, I wasn't able to see it in terms of the, you know, lip movements, if it matched the vocals perfectly, but if that was live, just so impressive, man, so impressive.
And also, how many musicians out there would study a genre of music that they don't make? Like, I don't make this music, I don't even listen to this, but I can understand what's going on. Like, that's a part of your practice as a musician and as an artist, is to kind of like study the real estate of musicianship. So now you can understand how these women are making vocals work, and then you can kind of weave that into what you do.
Another way that they train that kind of stability is by doing semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. Exercises like, of course, the SOVT. I love to do that with clients with a cup. You can also work on breath control exercises, practicing stabilizing the ascension of the diaphragm, like we mentioned, just holding out like a TS for a long time, getting to where you can hold that while you're dancing and moving for, you know, 1 to 2 minutes. Lip rolls, trills, you know, all those things can help you practice while moving and while dancing, because they obviously have to do it while dancing. It's not enough just to be doing it in the studio, because that won't correlate to the stage. But if they practice it while dancing and they do these SOVT style exercises, semi-occluded vocal tract exercises, over time it builds that repetition and it builds that muscle memory to be able to show up onto a stage like this and just nail it.
One of the coolest things I heard was that Chris Brown, when he had his artists under his record label, they would have to run on the treadmill while singing their songs.
Nice.
Yeah, and they killing them low registers.
Great high notes there. Starting to get up into that mixed register. It didn't sound shouty. It didn't sound like she was what we call pulling too much chest voice up. And I won't dork out too much. But again, just so impressive. So impressive. Nice.
Yeah, the girl in the back is killing that jump. That's why his hand up there. She's singing the mellophone parts. Yeah, yeah.
We'll slip on those high notes in the back there. Yeah, such as proves that they have their mics in the mix, and you can hear when it goes in between the studio versus the live mic, but you know, just props. This stuff is difficult, you know, it's really, really difficult. The amount of repetitions that you have to put in to be.
And he's right. It's very difficult, especially with the dancing and things like that. Usually you'll see people kind of make a pivotal decision. They're either going to be a singer and a dancer, or a singer that does not dance. And it makes a huge difference in your performance. The hard part, I think, for people is figuring out choreography that's stylistically unique. Like, you want to stand out on stage. You want to actually, like, you know, make that energy transfer perfectly from ear to visual to the audience and things like that. So I think that's the harder part, but that was pretty cool. I think too, when we're considering how we're designing our sound and our vocals and stuff like that, how much of the emotions we're driving home isn't really there. One thing he didn't point out, at least because it's probably not pertinent to the video he was making, but in terms of songwriting, that song probably had like 2 notes of emotions, and it had like high power energy and then kind of chill high powered energy, right? When you're thinking about some of the greatest songs, you know, in terms of the world, not like your parents' playlist, but the greatest songs, you know, usually they have a wide range of emotions, or they deliver on one emotion really, really well. When you can't pick between one or two, you usually just get like cheeseburger music. And then when you can't really pick any emotion at all, you don't really have music. You have more of like this kind of like, I call them podcast rap songs, where it's just some dude rapping over a beat with no point, kind of, you know. So let's get into our next one here, and let's see what we're talking about. Oh yeah, this one. So if you've ever heard of Lewis Capaldi, I've never heard of him until like recently, but he has Tourette's. And just imagine, like I said, you're designing your sound and you're going through all these vocals and these practices, you're writing everything, you're going to school for music, you hired musicians, you finally got the band, you made the logo, you did the music, you recorded it, you made the artwork, and then suddenly you start thinking like, man, let's take this show on the road. You start going on the road, you're paying for gigs, you're paying for venues, you're paying for insurance, you're getting gas money, you're figuring out the PetroDollar deal so you can make sense of things. You get to your show and you get on stage and you start to do the countdown. The drummer counts you off, the crowd starts singing, everybody's going crazy. You're seeing all the baddies, all the cool guys, and everybody's watching you and get ready to sing. And then suddenly you have a Tourette's episode. What would you do in that situation? Like, how would you translate that into what you know, want to happen? What kind of consequence do you get? And then how would you be feeling in that moment, right? A lot of people would panic. A lot of people would shut down or like revert to like their inner instinct, their inner child, right? But I want you to see how Lewis handles this. Look at that crowd.
Listen.
And here you can see the symptoms starting to affect him.
Just to know.
All them riggers and stuff is still back there. Like, if you even just pay attention to like the stage and stuff like that, they paid for all of this. Like, all of this is investment, and look what's happening. He's even pointing to his he's pointing to his crew, saying it's him. He can't figure out, you know, he has to just deal with the symptoms right now. But yeah, these are one of the moments that people don't really think about, like what happens if you burp on stage, or if you sneeze in the middle of a note, or you know, what if something uncomfortable happens? But something like that you can't control, right? And then you have to think about, okay, we talked about the PetroDollar deal. We talked about how expensive it is to build these stages, how crucial it is to get your notes right, and then for it to go like this, how do you then expect, let's say, sponsors and investors to react to this? You seen how the crowd reacted, right? And I always say how the crowd is either going to be fickle or give you a whole lot of grace depending on if they like you or not. But this is something that people have to manage and try to figure out in real time. Like, you could figure out a whole bunch of different stuff like networking, money, investments. You can get your music right, you can write the songs, you can get all these people to buy tickets. But at the end of the day, anything could throw a wrench in the system and then change everything up. And then suddenly you have to figure out what to do in the real moment. And that's why the vocal coach is pointing that out, where as you're dancing, all of the things you're thinking about as a singer play a huge role. And then it also plays a huge role in how you practice and produce it all. So let's get into our last clip of the morning, and then we'll try to figure out how this all intersects into our own careers. Oh no, that actually is the last clip. Hold on, did I get the right one? Yeah, that was the last one. So yeah, those are the clips that we have right now, and I essentially wanted you to pretty much focus on like how you are pretty much going to be in control of most of the things when you're putting yourself on stage, but then how easily you can lose control, right? So the PetroDollar deal was a good example of how everybody thought things were going to be gravy 50 years ago, and then suddenly everything changed. You can see how Lewis had to really in real time figure out what to do in that moment that had almost nothing to do with music. It was a medical issue, you know? And so the crowd helping out really, really helped, I guess, for him to understand where his audience is. But now you have to consider that just in reality, just to be, you know, really blunt and realistic in a moment, like how that affects your career. Like what this means if you're on like, let's say you do really well and you're on like your 50-year anniversary tour and that happens. What happens if you're in the middle of like a really, really long note for, let's say, a music video shoot, and this is your one shot to get it because you're running out of sunlight and that happens? Like, it's a real thing that people have to think about. And so designing the sound that you have really, really matters. Designing the tours you have, the builds you have, everything matters. And it all comes down to essentially how you want to design things. So let's see if we can actually talk to Gemini real quick and then dive a little bit more into how this sound works here. So I'm gonna test it out real quick and see if we can get some stuff in order here. Aha, I found it. All right, so I believe I found what I need, and let us open. Mic check. Can you hear me now? Okay. So you should hear me now. All right. Let us go back here. So essentially what we're looking at here is that acoustic intimacy and presence is going to be the key thing that they focus on. And so we have here the initial time delay gap. This is the time between hearing the direct sound from the performer and the first reflection of the walls. A short ITDG, which is usually under 20 milliseconds, creates a sense of presence and warmth, making the audience feel physically closer to the artist, which heightens emotional vulnerability. Reverberation time, longer reverb times, usually found in like churches and like cathedrals and things like that, evoke awe and the sublime feeling you usually get, while shorter and drier reverb, common in like jazz clubs or like really nightclubs and like DJ situations, strip clubs and stuff like that, foster a sense of connection and detail. So like a trumpet player, you're going to hear more of the details of like how they're initiating a note versus like the actual presence of a note if they were probably, I don't know, 40 feet away from you or something like that, or 50 feet away from you. And then as we get into the psychoacoustics and frequency responses, sound designers account for how the human brain processes different frequencies to trigger moods. So this is what I was talking about when I said hip hop started using more 808 basses and more sounds that are like lower basses instead of getting their own drums and unique styles. This is what you started to see people utilize more and more in their record labels. So sub bass, these frequencies are felt in the body rather than just heard. They are used to create physical tension, excitement, or a sense of power. So when you hear a big beat just coming boom, 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 and it just slaps you in the chest like that, there's a reason they wanted you to feel that way, right? It's really hard to emulate that with a natural bass guitar, even on record. So what bassists usually have to do is they'll mix their amps a certain way to kind of emulate what they feel is going to be a big booming thump. Now, the combination of this sub bass frequency combined with, let's say, a kick drum makes for an even more pronounced sound that you can design to get even a punchier noise, or sometimes a more epic feeling instead of like just a warm, rounded bass. It really helps in hip hop, but you're starting to see even like country stars use 808 bass. I've seen, I don't want to say death metal, but like heavy metal bands starting to use 808 basses for the same reason. You can feel it when you go to these festivals too. Like the speakers just nudge the energy right towards your chest. And so it's completely different than hearing a double bass drum kit going crazy. When that double bass drum kit is going crazy, it feels one way. When you hear an 808 kick drum come in, it feels a totally different way. So now let's look at the mid range, the 1 to 4 kilohertz. The human ear is sensitive here. It's the frequency of the human voice. Clear reproduction in this range is essential for conveying the emotional nuance of a singer's performance. This is usually like if you hear my voice right around where you start to identify my voice. Like there's a low part of my voice like that doesn't matter. But then there's the higher part that I probably can't turn off the lower part to isolate. But that's the part that actually makes my voice have an identity, that makes most people's voice have an identity. When you're a singer, you have to be able to move through that range and keep your tonality, which is where something like when we were watching with Lewis, Tourette's is gonna like totally mess with that. Smoking totally messes with that. Certain like temperatures can mess with that as well, and it can change how you can hit these frequencies, how your muscle is gonna contract and relax in order so you can reach these frequencies. And then lastly here we have the visual and spatial psychology. So that means like when you go to a stage, what it looks like, why you're lower than the stage, why the room looks a certain way, and things like that. So the proscenium effect, framing the stage, creates a psychological boundary, making the performance feel like a window into another world. And then we have sightline optimization. Now I want you, as we're going through these vocabulary and stuff, I want you to think about like our great grandparents going to concerts. Like where we used to watch Elvis just on like a elevated stage with a guitar and band, what that has transformed into now, okay? And then think about like juke joints in the South, or sock hops for our grandparents when they were in high school and stuff like that. The understanding of what a performance and live event has completely changed. So like I said, sightline optimization. If an audience member has to strain to see, their cortisol levels will rise, creating a barrier to emotional engagement. Designers use C values to ensure every seat has a unobstructed view, allowing the viewer to relax and lose themselves in the art. And I'm assuming the C value is how they basically make a C around the stage. There's no real, I guess you can say, straining going on with people. And then, oh, there's actually another section here, the atmospheric control, the black box. Modern sound stages are often designed as black boxes to provide a complete sensory vacuum. By eliminating external light and sound like the sun or cars driving by or, people's phones and stuff like that, designers can use high contrast lighting and focused audio to command 100% of the audience's attention, making the emotional peaks of performances feel significantly more intense than they would in a natural setting. So if you went to a wedding and it's just out in the open, right, and you hear the violinist playing, you're dealing with the wind, the birds chirping, cars driving by, aunties chewing too loudly, whatever's going on, right? If you have that same violinist in a vacuum, you can then really, really, really capture the pure tone of their instrument. And there's actually key technical metrics for these emotional impacts. So noise criteria, which is, I guess it says 15 to 20. This total silence allows for a dramatic pin drop moment. And then they have the binaural quality index, which is high lateral energy, which makes the audience feel enveloped by the sound. And then you have the visual proximity, which has to be just over 100 feet or more, generally the limit for seeing facial expressions clearly, or just under, 100 feet. And so after that point, you pretty much won't see facial expressions clearly. So that's probably why you'll see female singers really caked on makeup, and you'll see dudes, they'll usually take their shirts off or something like that because, he can't look at you. So he'll do something crazy like that. So let's see if we can find out how this really affects musicians versus singers. All right. Let's see here. So with both musicians and singers rely on the same physical space, the way a soundstage is engineered affects them differently because of how the human ear prioritizes speech versus instrumental texture. I actually didn't know that, which makes sense because when you see like an orchestra and a choir come together, it does create like an entirely different, I guess you can say, sound experience, audio experience. But not just like on the obvious reason, like it does add, like the vocals have more lower timbre if they have tenors and bass singers and stuff like that. And then the higher notes really do add a little bit more texture to the higher instrumentation, like the flutes and the clarinets and stuff like that. For a singer, the soundstage is designed on intimate clarity. Because the human brain is evolutionarily hardwired to detect emotion in the human voice, even minor acoustic flaws can break the audience's immersion. And right there is the part that I really wanted to drive home with Lewis's clip, is that point still stands for him too. Like even somebody who has a disability or an ailment or a disease or a medical condition, they still have to practice within this principle here. The human brain, right? Our genetics, our physiological makeup. I don't know what you would call it here, right? All of this stuff matters when we're getting on stage, and how we design our music, how we rap and things like that. It was slightly broken down by Pharrell. I think it was in a video. I'm probably saying the wrong artist, but Pharrell, whoever it was, they were saying how you can say something like very flat and very like matter-of-factly, like you just don't care about who you're talking to, and then you can say it with emotion, like you want this person to feel what you're saying, you want them to agree with you, you're trying to encourage an emotion out of them. Two things happen here. You're gonna have to do it, which means you have to get out of your comfortability and stop being like a prick about who you are and be an artist for once. And then on the other hand, you have to be in control of what that outcome is. So you can't just do shit that's provocative just for the sake of being provocative, because you might not like what you get. So that part is very, very, very difficult, but it's still true for somebody like Lewis at the same time. So intelligibility, the STI, designers use the speech transmission index to ensure that consonants, the plosives like p, t, and k, aren't washed out by echoes. If an audience can't hear the lyrics clearly, the emotional narrative of the song is lost. Well, that makes sense. So I can see how I'm talking into this mic, it's like probably like, I don't know, maybe a foot from my mouth. If the speaker that was projecting my voice was probably like 1,000 yards away from you, you wouldn't hear shit. You wouldn't hear nothing. You wouldn't know what's going on. So that makes sense. And then we have the presence range. Stages are often tuned to highlight frequencies between 2 kilohertz and 5 kilohertz. This is where the vocal edge lives. Boosting this acoustically helps the singer's voice cut through a loud band, allowing the audience to feel the singer's breath and vocal grit. Then we have vocal monitoring. Emotionally, a singer needs to hear their own pitch perfectly to remain confident. That'd be like if you sang and we muffled your ears, you would probably be all out of tune, and then you would probably tell us you felt like you were, and you wouldn't be. Sound stages often use angled wedges or specific early reflection zones so the singer feels like they're in an acoustic bubble with the audience. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So basically the sound hits the singer's ear a little bit earlier so that way they can actually catch their notes quicker and then make adjustments on the fly within seconds. Do you see how there's a blending here of science, technology, and engineering along with your artistic abilities? I'm highlighting this as well to show you that you, as musicians, need to be digging deeper into what you're doing in order to have greater understanding. So that way, somebody like Gemini doesn't have to do this in a matter of moments to create a new song behind you, or Suno, or Claude, or Grok, or whoever these little guys are, right? So as a human, if you understand this, you can manipulate AI music, an instrument, even a band to do way more with the soundstage because you would understand these things. So I'm just highlighting that for a moment here before we go on. So now let's switch over to the musician side of things. The musician has an envelopment priority. So I'm more of a instrumentalist when it comes to live performances. I haven't dove into vocalization yet, so I would probably understand more of this. For instrumentalists, particularly in jazz, orchestral, and hip hop context, the focus shifts from clarity to spatial texture and power. Dynamic range is the first place. A well-designed stage allows for a massive crest factor, the difference between the quietest and loudest sounds. For a pianist or a horn player, the room must be quiet enough to hear the mechanical noise of the keys, but expansive enough to handle the fortissimo peak without clipping the air. So what they mean by that is like you want to be able to hear the tips and taps of the hammers hitting the strings and the clanks of the keys on the valves of a trumpet or the keys of a saxophone moving, right? You want to be able to hear that, but usually that causes for the mic to be extremely close, right? And when the mic is that close and then suddenly the trumpet player wants to play at fortissimo, really, really, really loud, the air that's hitting that mic is going to make it clip, which is going to cause it to sound like noise. And usually that's where everybody goes, turn it off. We don't want to hear anything, right? And so to avoid that, they have to really, really, really consider the mix, and they have to understand space and understand where everything is, and then as well as energy, which we're going to get into here. Lateral energy. Musicians benefit more from lateral reflections, sound coming from the side walls. This creates envelopment, making the listener feel like they are inside the instrument rather than just looking at it. Low end coupling. For bassists or drummers, the stage floor itself acts as a resonator. A floating or sprung stage allows low end frequencies to vibrate through the floor, creating a physical, visceral emotion that the audience feels in their chest. So I was explaining this earlier when we were talking about how the 808 and the kick drum mixes. And then I told you to think about how like Elvis used to be like on a high stage and stuff like that. This is a bit of that. So when you're down low dancing and then you hear the foot of the kick drum pounding, that sound reverberates along with the mix as well. And it creates this big, like it's saying, wall of sound, right? It helps for everybody to kind of like stay in groove together as well, since we can all feel the reverberations now. So let's get into a summary of what the difference is here. Thanks to Gemini, they're being all extra thorough. So the feature Early Reflections has an impact on singers, which provides pitch security and confidence, right? And the impact on musicians is that it enhances the body and timbre of the instrument. High frequency damping. This affects singers by reducing harsh sibilants like right? So dampening all that allows for more of, like, even if I'm using S's, F's, like as in Frank, T's, stuff like all of that stuff makes noise. It's all sound and energy that you have to figure out how to mix. For musicians, this can make instruments sound dull if over applied. So it'd be like the sharpness of a high note on a trumpet suddenly sounding like the wah of your mom nagging for laundry. That's the difference here. And then stage vibration, the actual stage vibrating, can be a distraction or called mic rumble for singers, but then is essential for feeling the groove or beat physically. So now you got to navigate between what kind of stage you want, what kind of stage you're moving with. Sometimes they actually raise the drummer just so the drummer sits on the stage and that doesn't actually like vibrate everything else down there. So there's a lot of different ways you can handle that. There's actually technical distinctions, reverberation time, the ideal decay time, which is, I can't even see that, it's so small. Okay, I don't even know what that is. Often differs based on the performer. So singers prefer a shorter formula, approximately 0.8 to 1.1 seconds, to keep the lyrics from blurring. Musicians often prefer longer, 1.2 to 2.0, to allow notes to bloom and blend naturally. Okay, so that makes sense. And you got to figure out the mix between the two. So let's ask Gemini, how would a mixing engineer navigate mixing a, let's say, a 4-piece band of a singer, bassist, piano player, and we'll say trumpet, and trumpet. And I want it to give me a visualization of the setup. And I'm gonna have it actually design a canvas. We're gonna put it on thinking and we're gonna send it through. So we're gonna let Gemini think, we're gonna figure out what's going on with that. But essentially it's gonna hopefully walk us through how you can possibly design your practice room or navigate this as an engineer. And so it's doing it in real time. And while it's still thinking, I'm actually read you what it says here. It says, mixing a quartet of this nature, singer, piano, bass, and trumpet, is an exercise in acoustic realism. Unlike pop mixes where everything is processed into a wall of sound, a jazz-leaning quartet mixes about creating a 3D virtual stage where each player has a physical coordinate. The mixing engineer acts as a spatial architect, using 4 primary tools to place these performers: volume, panning, frequency, and reverb. Volume meaning distance and closeness, panning meaning whether it's left or right, frequency is EQ, meaning height, meaning like which volume you hear or which instrument you hear more of, and then reverb, the size of the room. So the mixing strategy is that the foundation here, which is the bass, is the floor of the mix. It is kept dead center to provide a solid low-end anchor. It is often mixed dry, which means less reverb, to maintain its punch. This is going to help a lot of the hip hop people that's going to be, mixing and stuff like that too. A lot of times we try to use natural bass when we're making hip hop, but there's an actual demand from the speakers and the headphones that we listen to them on that's a lot different. So you got to pay attention to this. The emotional core, the singer. The vocal is the frontmost element. It sits center but is boosted in the 3 to 5 kilohertz range to feel closer to the listener's face. The harmonic bed, let's say the piano in this band, because a piano is a wide multi-octave instrument, it is often panned slightly to one side, e.g. 30 to 50% to the left, or recorded in stereo to wrap around the edges of the mix. I personally usually tilt like a little bit to the right because I'm playing melody in the piano usually, and I like to at least in my head visualize that the right hand is in the right ear, you know, a little bit. But I guess here you can kind of probably go crazy. You could probably put the left hand in the left side, put the right hand in the right side, or like I said, just record it in stereo. And then lastly, we got the dynamic peak, which would be the trumpet. The trumpet is a directional beam of sound. So when you see the open bell, it actually does, like, as soon as you see a marching band like turn, all the sound leaves. Like you'll hear all of the song perfectly right here, and then it'll just turn and you won't hear a thing. Or it'll just sound muffled because it's bouncing off of walls and stuff, right? It is panned to the left, or it is panned to balance the piano, so 30 to 50% to the right. It requires a tail of reverb to soften its sharp transients so it feels like it's in the same room as the others. And basically it's describing like as you stop playing the instrument, it's just gonna cut off, right? And so when that happens, you can feel that this instrument just cut to silence a lot faster than, let's say, the singer who, when she stopped singing, had a little bit of reverb left. So you gotta kind of play with the mix, or at least have them mixed similar on the same reverb, so that way it feels as though they're in the same room together. You can definitely hear that with drums. If you add 2 or 3 or 4 different drum kits together, how they're just not mixing together at all, it doesn't sound good. And so here it has a quartet mix visualization, and I want to see if we can actually get this into a bit of a more I guess you can say illustrated version. So we'll read this next section, and then we'll move on to how we can adjust this. So it says bleed is glue. In a 4-piece recording, the trumpet will bleed into the piano mics. Instead of fighting it with gates, the engineer uses that bleed to create a natural glue that makes the band sound like they're playing together rather than in isolation. Frequency slotting. The piano and trumpet often fight for the same 1 to 4 kilohertz. The engineer will often carve a small hole in the piano's EQ at exactly the frequency where the trumpet is most melodic. And then the phantom center. By keeping the bass and singer center, the engineer creates a strong vertical spine for the mix, allowing the piano and trumpet to provide width that makes the listener feel like they're sitting in the front row of a club. And so that's pretty much how Gemini is going to break down the basics of understanding a soundstage for this little quartet band here, right? And I'm gonna see if we can make a more illustrated version. Let's see here. All right, so while that works on that, we're gonna kind of break down here what it says. The singer placed in the center, the bass in the center, piano to the left, trumpet to the right. And all of this should essentially create some kind of immersion of sound for everything, right? Oh, we actually have a little bit more of an illustration here. Okay. It's got a 2D map, a panoramic view. This represents the left to right panning and front to back depth placements. So you have the rear distance. Oh, you can't see my mouse, can you? Let me see if I can show you my mouse. Don't think I can get you to see the mouse. I think I can. No, I can't get you to see the mouse. Oh well. I'll use my brain nodules. So if you look here in the square, on the upper left, it says rear and distant. So that's the back. And then at the bottom, it says front to intimate right here near my shoulder, right? So this is where the front is. This is where the audience is going to be. Up there is where the back is going to be. So at the top of the square, which would be the back of the stage, says room microphones, captures the air and reverb. And then to the left of the stage, which would be stage left, the piano is over there, 40%, and then the trumpet is on the right, and then the bass is in the center, and then the singer is in the center. So I believe this is a soundstage visualization. This is how a mixing engineer positions a contemporary jazz quartet to create a 3-dimensional emotional experience for the listener. Okay, so now let's get into the frequency slotting, and this is the part that the singers have to manage as well. to prevent instruments from sounding muddy, the engineer assigns each of its own, or each instrument has its own frequency home. So as you can see, the bass sits around 20 to about like 100, 110 kilohertz. Piano goes to 100 to about 1 point, I'll say like 7, 8, right? Singer goes to about 1 to 2.5, maybe 2.6. Trumpet sits around 2 kilohertz or 2000 kilohertz, and then it ends at about 10,000. And then you just have open air and shimmer, which can be like just honestly the room, really. That's all that'll really be. Just echo and shimmer, the mics in the background that it was talking about, right? And as we get down here, I think it'll explain in the cheat sheet here. Okay, cool. So volume, to make it sound close and louder, you bring the instruments closer, right? That's why the singers are right there, right? Reverb will make it feel less dry or more wet, depending how close or far it is. And then the frequency will be bright and crisp if it's up front, and then muffled if it's in the back, like air, pretty much. Like you can hear all of these things when you're on a stage. And if you're looking at like a pop stage, usually you'll probably never experience this because these people know these frequencies down to a T. But a lot of this stuff is going to be considered like state of the art. So when you're considering designing your music, when they're saying, are you radio ready? Are you stage ready? Can we take this show on the road? And your band doesn't talk through any of this at all, ever, for more than like, ever, then you can see how this can make the performance for the audience not feel emotionally attached or as immersed. And it changes everything, right? So then now let's look here. And then let's take a look at how pretty much when designing a soundstage, what is the main emotional drivers that are affecting the audience? Now let's understand it from the emotional side. We did the engineering and designing side. Let's see the other side. All right, so as Gemini sits up here and thinks, we're gonna go ahead and go, okay, we're good. Designing a soundstage is essentially an emotional architecture. While an engineer looks at blueprints, they are actually matching up how to trigger specific neurochemical responses in the audience. So I talked about this before when I talk about how I used hip hop as an example, but it is sound in general. But I talked about how artists are in control and try to manage how you feel about their music, and then juxtapose it with who they are in their personal life, right? So a really, really tough gangster dude, Think about, just put that in your head, tough gangster dude. Now I want you to imagine him playing the bagpipes, right? There's a little bit of like science that goes into what you believe and what you think and culturally what's relevant, and then how sound is gonna validate that, right? So this is a part of musicianship that really, really causes controversy for a lot of people, because now you have to think like, well, I wonder why, let's say, Sabrina Carpenter is acting so promiscuous when she sings so bubbly. I wonder why the downtrodden, underdog jelly roll is so wholesome. You're trying to figure that out, and a part of it is because of the dissonance you're having between who you think these people are and the music they're making and how they're designing the sound for you to hear. Okay, so let's look again at the proximity driver, intimacy. So when they're designing a stage, when you pay tickets and you go crazy and you don't know why, and you're screaming for no reason and you're confused as to why people think you're weird, well, this is going to explain a little bit of it, right? So intimacy, this is the feeling that the performer is speaking or singing directly to you. It relies on the initial time delay gap, that of which we just went over, the split second between the direct sound and the first reflection. The goal is to minimize the perceived distance. And so let's say like singers, when they like lean all close and start swooning the girl and she starts acting like she's going crazy for some reason, we would like to think she's in control of her emotions right there. But in reality, she's being affected by all of the stimuli around her. Now, that of which she falls victim to because of her sensibilities. If you're not the type of person to not scream at Justin Bieber, then it is what it is. But the point is that we can make you do that if we want to. Okay. We can make you do that, and we can make you feel a way if we really wanted to. Like, I can make you feel sad at the drop of a dime because your emotions are that flighty. Just people in general, humans, right? So like, I can just show you a very sad picture and then suddenly you'll feel sad. It's not real. It's not a thing, right? So now that sound designers and soundstage designers have figured that out, they've learned systems, formulas, and able to do it over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? And when you figure out how these system works, you got to figure out how much it costs, how to move it and pick it all up, worry about the PetroDollar deal and all this stuff, the tariffs, and whether or not your equipment needs to be insured or manufactured again. You got to worry about all of that, right? This is why it takes such meticulous energy for them to do this. It's that serious and that nerdy for them because of what's on the line and then what's at risk compared to, you know, like I always point out, the little girl on TikTok just making videos, right? So now when you're going onto a musical performance, you probably are thinking, I like this artist. I went to work to pay for this ticket and I'm here to just have a good time. You're probably not thinking, this artist found me because of my likes and an algorithm and then just inundated me with things that I enjoy, that of which I now see value in, and I'm willing to pay money in order to see how they're going to make me feel, because you're not in control of how you feel about them, right? And the reason that's true is because you don't know them. Like, you only know them for music. And that's the discrepancy a lot of people are going to struggle with when it comes to identifying these things and then realizing your favorite artist uses these things to help you call them your favorite artist. So just keep that in mind, because I'm speaking from the perspective of a musician to give musicians the tools here, but I'm pretty sure there's some audience members here who are consumers that are trying to understand a little bit more about how the music that they love works. So just keep that in mind here. So next we're going to go into the awe and grandeur. If you've ever seen Michael Jackson just stand still with the bandolier, if you've ever seen any girl cheat on her boyfriend because the rock star had like a sleeveless tank top with a skull on it, this is kind of how this works right here, okay? Sometimes the goal isn't to be close, but to make the audience feel a part of something massive and legendary. This is driven by the reverberation and lateral energy. The goal is to make the sound feel larger than the room itself, and then it gives you the panoramic on how to do it. So when sound hits the audience from the side walls, the brain perceives width. This triggers a sense of wonder, and the sound seems to wrap around the body rather than just hitting the face. So this is kind of why when you see pop stars, usually like K-pop and stuff like that, you'll see it in cheerleading music. They do it a lot with the cheerleading routines where it's just very, very loud. The idea behind it is that this wonder and this awe and stuff like that, combined with who the artist is, combined with how you feel about the artist, is all being tied together for you to have this experience, right? This is why it's always difficult for audience members to understand this when they see like a group of women just screaming at a shirtless skinny man. They're confused because they're thinking like typical people, like maybe they're attracted to the dude's abs, maybe it's because he's covered in baby oil, or maybe it's because he's wearing tight pants. But in reality, it's none of that. It's actually, well, it's some of that. It's a combination of that alongside the science of what they're experiencing and where they're experiencing it, right? For example, take a shirtless skinny man covered in baby oil and then just put him in a shopping mall. He looks like a pervert, right? But give him a microphone, some purple lights, some foam, or not foam, but like some fog and some chords and some genre music, and you'll be good. And that this same skinny, moist man is no longer creepy, and a lot of people want to hug him suddenly, right? And so when we figured this out with like Elvis, when we figured this out with Beyonce, when we figured this out with Britney Spears, we just doubled down on the formula and just kept going and going and going, to the point that we're now, like the vocal culture is saying, you can kind of almost, you never really know who's cheating or who's not, like who's an authentic, like I didn't use 3000% science to get my music done type of thing. So let's get into the next part here. We have immersion, which is the focus driver, or This driver is about the absence of distractions. The human brain is a survival machine. It is constantly scanning for predators, background noise. So like right now, you're probably listening to this, and then if you heard like a boom, 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 boom behind you, you probably take your headphones out and look behind you, right? That's normal. Good. Be aware, right? So it says by removing these, the audience enters a flow state, which is why you'll see, I've actually seen this happen in real time. I was playing piano and I noticed somebody in the crowd would just not stop staring, and it's because they were in the flow state. They just wouldn't stop staring because I'm playing and I'm in that vacuum of music that until I stop playing does nothing change, right? So now when we think about the skinny shirtless dude who's like gyrating on the floor, making all the women scream, right? They have to be able to do that and focus on that moment too. So you can't have that happen and then also have like band dancers on the right doing backflips. That's confusing. You can't have fireworks on the left. That's confusing. So you got to make it focus, right? And this is where they say you get the black box isolation effect. You can get very specific lighting, very specific sounds, and all that kind of stuff, right? And then lastly, let's talk about the tension and release, which is the physicality driver. Emotions are often felt physically before they are processed mentally. I want to pause here because this transcends music here. This is the part where I was talking about how when you're working with, like, for example, Selena and Yolanda's example, where somebody's anger has to go through their body first before they say, I am angry and this is how I feel. This is a part of human nature that I think musicians need to understand, because a lot of times you may be in that moment where like you're on stage and like with Lewis, you may get angry. Physically, yes, we can understand you're angry. Mentally, nobody's going to accept that, which is the priority usually, right? Usually when you meet an angry person, everybody's going to tell them to stop being angry before we address the anger or the cause of the anger. And so this being understood is now being utilized in music and on sound stages. So it says sound stages use infrasonics and high sound pressure levels capability or high SBL capability to create physical tension. Physical tension, like not oh man, this girl's really cute and the lights are like, no, it's like I physically feel a thing happening in my body, okay? And so the goal creates a fight or flight response that is safely channeled into excitement. You can first see this as a kid, usually with TV shows, but then on a more extreme example would be like roller coasters. Or if you're, let's say, eating food, sometimes you can see that, like the chewing, the taste, the feeling, the smell, all these physicalities that are going on. You seeing your mom serve you a plate feels different than you just warming up leftovers, right? It's all different. It all plays a role, and it all has basically levels to what the immersion actually does for the audience. This is why when you, just to keep it on food, why like chefs prefer you to eat food hot, why they prefer to serve you while you're seated, and why, you know, a lot of times mom prefers you to actually have some kind of, you know, decorum to how you eat, because it creates a complete immersive experience compared to somebody who's, let's say, living alone, or they got, you know, pre-made food and they're just microwaving it and it's not cooked immediately, like it wasn't like coming right off the stove. It's a completely different experience, which is why people who talk about food, they'll always talk about like cooking with love and things like that, right? So to bring it to music, it's the same thing. If you don't have, let's say, these like physicalities to your music, like they're saying here, the chest thump, the praising shimmer, this like sparkle of the strings and things like that, and then this like void of silence, your body can't really react to much. So it's just in this monotonous kind of just tone. It's just monotone is what the word I'm looking for. And it's just sitting there and just listening to music, right? You're not being nudged to sing, you're not being nudged to dance, you're not being nudged to like focus or anything like that. You're just kind of present, and it creates this kind of annoying feeling, really. It just sounds like background music. You do that a lot when you're in the shopping mall and you hear music in the background, because it's so quiet and so out the way. You tune it out. You want to ignore it because you realize, like it was saying, it's not a threat, so you don't worry about it, but it's also still there, so you got to still deal with it, so your body ignores it. So now if you want to be unignored, you got to start making the body move, making the body feel. And usually when you look at like a R&B singer or like some kind of like crazy like I would say like more burlesque show where like a lot of dancing and like visuals and stuff like that. They're utilizing all of this stuff in the extreme. Like it'll be like, even if it's a small show, like a drag show or whatever, they'll be trying to use extreme things to try to make you feel, whether it's visuals, loud music, was it practical skits and things like that. All these kinds of different things are going on. So let me know what you guys think about this. This is a little bit of the closing of the emotional theme we have this week on music. So let me know what you guys think. I will be covering one last topic for you guys tomorrow, and then we'll get into it. I'm gonna see you guys this evening for the gaming stream on Twitch, and I will see you guys. This is Musician Talks.